Now, on our screen, we're going to close on this point. We want to get a very practical understanding of how we can implement this system of outpost work. You see, because as we mentioned before, not everybody is going to be directly associated with some overt large institution, but I wonder if it's possible to practice the principles of having an outpost even in our own homes. Now, on our screen is a symbol of a God-fearing Christian and loving home. Notice this. This says, "In his wisdom, the Lord has decreed that the family shall be the greatest of all educational agencies." We're told that the restoration and uplifting of humanity begins in the home. If we want to see a revival in the United States, in the world, it needs to start in the home. If we want to see a revival in Seventh-day Adventism, it needs to start in the home. It's not merely more teaching and preaching. There needs to be practical godliness, cherished and practiced in the home. It says, "It is in the home that the education of the child is to begin. Here is his first school." Family, all of these institutions, whether it be the publishing house, the sanitarium, the training school for missionary workers, all of them were to be just a larger revelation of the principles demonstrated in the Christian home. You see, part of the reason why Jesus' ministry was so efficacious was as a result of the condition of his home. As a result of the God-fearing influence of Mary and Joseph, they, to a very great degree, were able to formulate his character in a very beautiful way. In closing, on our screen is a symbol of a man by the name of Enoch. Very quickly, let's turn in our Bibles to the book of Jude. Let's turn in our Bibles to the book of Jude, that book right before the book of Revelation, Jude. Notice what the Bible says. Jude verse 14, rather, only one chapter, Jude 14. Jude 14. Let's see how the great patriarch Enoch was able to demonstrate outpost work even in his own experience. This says, "And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these things, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints." Notice verse 15. "To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly, among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So family, the patriarch Enoch was not merely giving the gospel in a regular, ordinary sense in his time. The context of these verses is actually referring to the second coming of Jesus. Yes, even Enoch, the seventh from Adam, was prophesying and preaching of the second coming of Jesus, an event that would not take place, yea, for 4,000 plus years in the future. But notice this counsel about the experience of Enoch. He, Enoch, did not make his abode with the wicked. He did not locate in Sodom thinking to save Sodom. He placed himself and his family where the atmosphere would be as pure as possible. Especially for those of us as men who are heads of households, we are under great obligation and spiritual responsibility to put our families in the best position possible. Then at times he went forth to the inhabitants of the world with his God-given message. Notice, every visit he made to the world was painful to him. How do we feel when we go to the major cities of this world, whether it again be New York, London, Hong Kong, San Francisco, Orlando? How do we feel when we go to these cities? Do we feel a sense of the sin and degradation that surrounds us? Not to say that there are not things that can be genuinely enjoyed in these localities, but do we have a great burden for the salvation of so many of the sinners that are unrepentant in these places? Do we have a divine burden for their salvation? It says, he saw and understood something of the leprosy of sin. After proclaiming his message, he always took back with him to his place of retirement some who had received the warning. Notice, Some of these became overcomers and died before the flood came. But some had lived so long in the corrupting influence of sin that they could not endure righteousness. And this is the point, family. As we think about implementing the system of evangelism, as we think about doing a practical work that will help to stem the tide of disease, of wretchedness, of the corruption that we see in war and the ruling elite and all of this, as we seek about engaging in this work, this outpost work that can be simply demonstrated in our own homes is the great solution that God has given. And just to give another practical illustration, let's very quickly turn in our Bibles to the book of Matthew. And we'll close looking at Jesus. Matthew chapter 4, we're going to start in verse number 23. Matthew 24 and verse 23, the Bible says, "And Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. And his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken of divers diseases and torments, and those that were possessed with devils, and those that were lunatic, and those that had palsy, and he healed them all." Family, again, this is the practical work that God has called us to do. And while we don't have the space truly to get into all of the details as to how to implement this in our homes, I pray that by God's grace that we at least have been given a vision of what we can do practically, individually, and collectively, again, even in our own homes, in order to stem the tide of all of the moral corruption that we see taking place about us.